Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to this evening's exclusive Clips and Conversations with Dr. Roger Ross Williams, executive producer, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, and Mara Brock Akil. You can clap it up. So today we're here to bring you an exclusive look at the film and a conversation that will offer a preview into Stamped from the Beginning, a documentary feature developed from the New York Times best-selling book written by Dr. Kendi. The film will release on Netflix later this year, so y'all are getting the early exclusive. And we'll be sharing a few clips from the film, which the filmmakers are really excited to discuss today. So let's welcome to the stage. Roger Ross Williams is an Oscar, Emmy, NAACP Image, Webby, and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker. And yeah, that definitely deserves a clap. Roger is the first African-American director to win an Academy Award for his film Music by Prudence. And you might also know some of his other projects, High on the Hog, Love to Love You, Donna Summer, and the 1619 Project. Hi, Roger. Please welcome Mara Brock Akil, showrunner and creative genius behind Girlfriends, The Game, and Being Mary Jane. And please welcome Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, National Book Award-winning author and the author of five New York Times best-selling books, including Stamped from the Beginning and How to Be an Anti-Racist. Dr. Kendi is the Andrew W. Mellon Professor in the Humanities at Boston University and is the director of the BU Center for Anti-Racist Research. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. For some reason. So let's start with Dr. Kendi. Could you tell us about the process of developing this documentary? Had you always intended to turn this book into a documentary, or was this something that came about after it was published?
Oh, it definitely came about after it was published. When I was writing and certainly researching Stamped from the Beginning, it was just a dream for this book to be out there, to be widely shared and consumed. I never imagined that it would be a bestseller or win a national award. But after it was published, and after so many people were transformed by learning about the history of anti-Black racist ideas, I knew that there were many people that may not read a 500-page book, but still needed to know and be transformed by this history. And so that's ultimately what led me down the path of what you're gonna see a little bit.
Amazing. Roger, to that point, this film is based on my tally is almost 600 pages, but
I try to trim off 100.
600 pages.
I wasn't scared too many folks.
It's a dense read.
Roger, can you walk us through the process of deciding what to pull from the book? The film is 90 minutes. How did you narrow in on what to highlight and what to feature?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank Netflix, our amazing executives, Chloe Bai, Dan Silver, Xana Lawrence, who's not here. We couldn't do this without them. And my amazing, beautiful producer, Elisa Payne. All right, well, that's a big question. So, I read How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I was just blown away by that book. That book was transformative for a lot of people. It was, I feel like it was #1 forever, for like a year. And how many years was it #1?
He just writes them.
He just writes them. I keep track. And then I look, and there's #1, and that number 6 or 7 is Stamped from the Beginning. And when I read Stamped from the Beginning, I was transformed because I learned so much that I didn't know. I saw racist ideas and the history of that in a totally new light. I saw myself in a new light, and I just had to do it. So I called Netflix and I said, can you help me? Let's do this together. They said yes right away, and we went on the journey. Now, taking a 600-page book and making it a 90-minute tight film it's almost an impossible task.
Herculean,
right?
maybe?
You know, my approach to it was to use all of the tools in my toolbox, animation, VFX, to the way we use archival, and to layer it, and basically walk you through the big points of this history, which I broke down into I call the 9 lies about Black people. And that enabled me to really be able to hit these nine points. So that was the basic structure. And it was a 3-year long journey that was sometimes, and sometimes it was a tough journey to accomplish, but we did it.
Amazing. And Mara, you've previously described Stamped as a body of work that demystifies and untangles racism. Can you elaborate on what that means for you and how this project sort of brought all of that to light for you?
What I love is, when you think about racism, period, it just seems insurmountable. And the book takes you to the origin. And that there's times if you think about racism, you're just swimming in it. You don't even know where it started, how it's affecting you. And so when the book kind of lands this idea that this racist idea is how it originates in the concept that if it can be built, then it can be deconstructed by understanding that. I think the first step to any movement and any change is acknowledging it and really being honest about it. So to learn about our history, American history, it's still a global history around that, but the American history about how we can maybe begin to do this work by first understanding it was why I'm here. As a filmmaker, as a producer with this, it's important to me what we put in the sea. These works are going to live beyond us. We have these names and we're touting everybody, but the work is what is going to wash ashore on our own shores and for us to change. And so it's important to me what we put in the world so that we can make that progress. And hopefully we can do it and see it in our own lifetime. And so I'm very happy to be a part of the project that is trying to dismantle racism for us, and for us to really take a look at it and understand that the passivity of knowing that racism exists is not enough.
So I think we're ready for our first clip. Roger, so this first clip from the film delves into a very complicated figure, one of the founding fathers and the 3rd president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. Can you share with us some context before you cue up this clip?
Yes. So, Thomas Contradiction Jefferson, as Kendi refers to him. This is Dr. Kendi's stuff. First thing I want to say is that this is the film is not done. You are getting an exclusive look to a work that's still in progress. So you may see some watermarks or some archive that still has the watermark on it. But so we're letting you see. No one has seen anything from this film. So you are the first people to see anything from this film. So it's a little rough. The approach to Thomas Contradiction Jefferson is that, the contributors to this film, I want to say, are all Black women academics. And the reason why I chose Black women academics and historians is because when I looked at the list of historians, I started to, I saw a pattern. I saw that, wow, most of the people doing this work at Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Stanford were Black women. And I thought, they can talk about these stories, these historical figures from a very personal perspective. So they talk about it in a way that you don't normally see historians, that you don't normally see academics talk about history. They talk about it from their own gut, from their own personal experiences. And this is their interpretation, this is the history, this is how we present Thomas Contradiction Jefferson.
Dr. Kendi, why was it important to tackle and unpack Thomas Jefferson's legacy in this film?
I think in many ways, Thomas Jefferson and his contradictions sit at the heart of the American project, of what particularly Black people have faced in this country's history. Someone who, as we sort of depicted, someone who spoke out against interracial sex while he was raping a 14-year-old girl, someone who spoke for both freedom while he was enslaving 600 people over the course of his lifetime, someone who at the same time wrote that Black people were inferior and couldn't think above the level of plain narration while he was training, I should say, while Black people were engaged in all forms of skilled activity on his on his plantation. I mean, so it was just, he was filled with these contradictions. And one thing I remember realizing when talking about Thomas Jefferson and even other enslavers like him is that what was striking is when they would write about Black people, and Thomas Jefferson would write about all the different ways he imagined Black people were stupid, Black people were lazy. But then when we would run away from his plantation and they would have to describe that Black person who ran away, suddenly it's a smart gal, right? Suddenly, don't be tricked because she's so brilliant, right? So when it was in their interest, they wrote the truth. But then when it was also in their interest, they lied about Black people.
Do either of you want to speak about Thomas Contradiction Jefferson?
I think for me, unpacking the lies, these racist ideas, and the war that goes on, it's a war within a person, and it's a war within the resistance to it, and the war with how much we go back and forth around trying to dismantle it. And here we are in 2023, and we're still trying to dismantle it. And I think what was important for us to be here today is that we're bringing a project home, sharing these clips exclusively with an audience that we believe probably understands this. But these contradictions are still going to be probably very controversial. You know what I'm saying? And that, to me, is important to keep pounding and people to understand, and that these contradictions in Thomas Jefferson are in all of us.
To your point about bringing this film here and sharing these exclusive clips and conversation, Roger, could you talk to us about the intended audience for this film and why it was important to bring it here to Martha's Vineyard and to this festival?
Well, thank you to the festival for having us. So, thank you. I mean, it's important to bring it home. It's important that our people see this work, because a lot of times we also are fooled. We also are, these racist ideas also affect Black people, and including me, including Dr. Kendi, and that he talked about, and how to be an anti-racist. So it's important to have the conversation in our community, but the audience is for all the world. It's a global audience, and that was really important. And also, it was really important for me to make this accessible, and that's why you will see all the pop culture references, because Thomas Jefferson is lifted up in popular culture, in cartoons, and everything, in the Hall of Presidents, all that stuff. And so it was important to really show it through the lens of pop culture, but also that to appeal to the global audience, to make it accessible so that everyone. It's also, we're talking about some heavy stuff, but it's entertaining and it's accessible, and that was really important. And it's everyone's problem. Racism, as Dr. Kendi says, it's everyone's problem. So if we become anti-racist, it improves all of our lives, not just the lives of Black people.
Just opening this up to, opening this up to whoever will have it. How do you think this film differs from other recent projects that sort of speak to the history and the impact of slavery in this country? I mean, maybe you just answered that.
I think, it's funny because we're in the war. Is it me? Is it my phone? Because I do have it here.
It might be that.
Could be the phone, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I need to use it later. Okay. It's funny, when I was reading the book, you realize who gets to tell the story is where the war begins. And here we are in books and in film still playing out. And we know America's biggest export are our images and the story. And I think I want this film to have such a feeling of impact that it makes people charged to want to go back to the study, because it's not just studying for studying's sake, for facts and figures, it's for our ability to figure out action. And so the interesting thing is that the printing press revolutionized the war around racist ideas. And here we are in the middle, and I think it's very interesting, that we need Netflix from a global perspective to talk about the story, to help undo and untangle some of the things that this industry has purported and still actually does. So even that is a contradiction and so it's also a victory that we get to, at this time when Florida and Texas and I can't keep up, where all the books are coming off the shelves. And now, even when we were making the film, we can't even keep up to the current history. Like even the idea that, DeSantis just said slavery was good for us. That narrative is tracked in the book. That narrative of how the idea keeps morphing and changing through technology that ends up in policy, that ends up in our lives, and that there are going to be some people who don't even know who Thomas Jefferson is, let alone know the contradictions within them and understand and how you even got here. So I think the film, I'm hoping, will create a feeling and an accessible feeling for us all to return to the history, to understand how to dismantle it. And again, and I know I keep harping on that, but that's you asked what makes this different. I think sometimes films were just hit and were heavy, and it's almost like I told you so, but I feel like maybe the language, the accessibility, even the humor sometimes the pill gets swallowed in there, and you might be able to say it differently to access someone who can actually hear it this time and not be so dense. It's funny, I keep telling people the book is 800 pages, and because I had to.
Is the book?
And I think it's because you have to study. I have broken pencils annotating that book, and but beautifully so, meaning I want to study, I want to know, and I have to reread some things to understand how we got here. And so, anyway, I think it's different in that it allows not only an access, but it allows an action in self that can perpetuate, and we also can have a conversation together at the water cooler.
Here.
And I'll pass it right back to you to introduce our next clip.
Well, that's why I brought my phone, because I am a writer at the end of the day, so I just wrote my comments about introducing the next clip because I wanted to say what I wanted to say. But anyway, one of the things in reading the book, Stamped, is that you have to realize is that racist ideas do not belong to one group of people. The disease of racism can embody all of us. Like in the book, we wanted to make space for that conversation in the film, how we too can participate in feeding the fire of racist ideas. In many ways, this conversation is one of the hardest ones because it requires all of us to look inward, that the fight begins in self, to take accountability. This next clip is called The Myth of Assimilation.
Thank you. Roger. Within the 9 lies that you wanted to narrow in on in this film, why was it important to speak to the myth of assimilation? And if you could share a bit, how has assimilation, this myth, affected you personally or professionally?
Yeah. Well, it was important scholarship in Dr. Kendi's book. And so this was a very important conversation to have within the Black community. It was very important for people to understand assimilation. A lot of people don't understand it, right? I personally, have fallen to this problem. It's very difficult for a young Black man to make it in the, believe it or not, in the docs world where and because everyone's white and you feel you have to carry yourself a certain way or act a certain way. And to make it to the top of that world, I feel you have to give up something, but you don't. But I had to learn that lesson. And reading Dr. Kendi's book and really understanding it, that was how I was transformed. That was something that I was like, a light bulb went off and I was like, wait a minute, I'm hiding part of myself to appeal to this, this white world that is not. And if I'm true to who I am, and if I'm myself, I'm going to shine more as an artist. My art is going to be more important. So,
Dr. Kendi, it's interesting to see the ways in which assimilation has morphed over the years in the propaganda. And I think just thinking of today, what do you think is sort of needed to make this a thing of the past? Like, what is the messaging that sort of needs to ring out?
I think we can start with recognizing that assimilationist ideas are racist ideas. And I'm mentioning that because it is widely believed that it is widely believed, even among scholars who study racism, that the only ideas that are racist ideas are those that state that, let's say, a particular racial group is genetically inferior or biologically inferior. People don't necessarily want to acknowledge that when people say that Black people are culturally inferior or behaviorally inferior, or this is what's wrong with black people. But black people, yes, there is something wrong with black people, but they can be civilized and developed. People believe because they think black people can be, quote, civilized and developed, and they're arguing against others who are saying we can't be civilized and developed, they think they're progressive, right? They think those ideas are, quote, not racist. No, those ideas are racist too, just in a different way. Because black people don't need to be developed. There's nothing wrong. So I think that's the first thing, and I think the second thing is for us as black people, and I think that's why, like, you know, the clip ended with that incredibly famous speech by Malcolm X that he gave in 1962 after LAPD raided and ended up killing a member of the Nation of Islam. And Malcolm X in particular routinely spoke to black people about the ways in which they had, or we had, been brainwashed into thinking there was something wrong with us. And so for me, if black people can acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with us, and what that means is that there's nothing wrong with us as a group, right? Are there days in which I'm acting in a lazy manner? Yeah, but there's a whole bunch of white people that same day that are acting in a lazy manner too. Right, so there's nothing wrong with us as a group, and if we could acknowledge that as a people, and that will then allow us to recognize that all these racial disparities that exist and persist, black people being more likely to be incarcerated. It's not because black people are more dangerous and violent. Black people are more likely to be killed by police. It's not because we're more reckless with the police than white people. Black people are more likely to be impoverished. It's not because we're lazy. If we realize those racist ideas about us are not true, then there's only one other explanation for why injustice persists, for why inequity persists, and that's racism. That's racist policies and practices that we, as a people, need to liberate ourselves from.
Thank you so much for that, and I'm going to hand it right back to you as we head into our final clip. Can you share with us some context about this final clip, and specifically why you were adamant, I'll use that word that we spoke about yesterday, why it was so important to showcase Phillis Wheatley in the film and in this moment?
Sure, so Phillis Wheatley, in 1773 actually, was that 250 years ago, became the first African American to publish a book in what later became the United States. But what people may not know is what she had to do, or what she had to prove, more or less, in order to get that book published. And this book, this clip, sort of speaks about that. But the reason why this clip was so powerful to me, and the reason why it's probably my most favorite sort of clip in the film, is because it's so relevant to the here and now. What Phillis Wheatley had to face is so relevant to what many black women in particular are still facing to this day. And I think the reason why I was so enamored with what these filmmakers were able to do is that they were constantly and consistently able to connect these historical moments to the here and the now. And I think that's one of the beauties, about this film.
And we'll have our third and final clip. The first time I saw this film, that was such a striking moment to watch all of these extremely eloquent doctors, thought leaders, like maybe my phone, everyone just reflecting on their own personal Phillis Wheatley moment. And if I may ask, if you all would like to share maybe a moment where your worth was called into question, or I'll start with you, Mara, but it's open to everyone.
I'll share what I shared with our team when we were talking about this moment. And I think I was even saying every Black woman's got a Phillis Wheatley moment. And mine actually happened with girlfriends. When I created the show, I didn't have, and I want to say this, I did not have the experience to run a show. I understood that. And what the promise was, okay, Mara, we know you know this show. You're the creator, you're the visionary, we get it, but you need to be paired with veteran producers. So I took on partners, and our first meeting, I said to them, I want your knowledge. I want that institutional knowledge, and I want to partner with you, and please know that in the third season, I want the show back. I also would love for you to stay. Like, if our working relationship is all great, and as we intend at this luncheon, let's go. So everyone moved forward with that idea. And here comes the third season, and if you go back in the history of the show, the first season was good, but the second season was off the charts, successful. And Kelsey Grammer is also a producer on the show, and that's another story how he got there. However, I do appreciate that I was able to parlay this show on the air, and I needed his partnership in that as well. So, but when it was time to take over the show, I have all the knowledge. I've been technically running the show without the title and the financial pay that goes with it. I said, hey, it's time. My partners, the writing partners with me, they agreed. But then at this point, I literally had to go to the head of the studio and have this talk. And I remember, and I want to shout out my husband, who is I'm getting emotional about this. But sorry, I did not. Anyway, so you're going in here, you have a hit show, your dream, spent all my mom's and my grandma's money to go to Northwest. I mean, all of these things, and you're here at this moment. You are majorly successful with no marketing campaign, no support, nothing. You're successful. And they are saying, but it's not broke. It's not broke. We don't need to fix it, which means let's everyone stay in their same places. And so I have to go there and basically pitch why I need to take over my show, because we couldn't make my deal to move forward. That was the issue. Anyway, long story short, I remember having cotton mouth. I remember I am losing this meeting. Oh, by the way, all these representatives I'm paying, they can't fight the fight. I'm in there. Nobody has my back, except my husband, who prepped me, but I was failing in the moment. I remember he had me, I'm talking about the executive, he just kind of cornered me. And I remember he asked me, I knew I was tanking, and his assistant comes in with the note, and you know what that means. Like, they're about to move you out of this meeting. And I remember sitting there, and I just closed my eyes, and I said a prayer. And I said, God, I need you now. And then he asked me, and he knew he had me on the ropes. And he asked me, well, Mara, who's the better writer? And I remember a roar came out of me, and I said, well, let me say this. You're not going to get me to say I'm better than them. But I will tell you this. If I'm not in that room, this show will fail. And at this moment, you have risked your career and everything, you have risked so much, but have to go to those lengths. And if that was not enough, I had to go sit and talk to Kelsey while he's eating a tuna sandwich before he went on air for his show, to say exactly the same thing, repeatedly over and over. And then now this beautiful dynamic that we had created in the room, you realize now I have to go back and repair, or it has to be repaired to move forward. And we did, but it didn't have to go there. That's one of my Phillis Wheatley moments, and it's one of the ones that you realize if you don't win that fight, and I didn't mean to be this long, but I want to say this, that even to this day, Girlfriends has gone to 4 generations of viewers at this point. And these are their words, not mine. I've been told that girlfriends raise them. I have told that girlfriends let them dream. I have told that girlfriends, they saw themselves. I have people weep on me because those were the memories they have with their aunt, their grandmother, their mom, and now those women have passed, and now when they watch Girlfriends, they can remember and get through the pain of not having those women. It is why I believe Tracee Ellis Ross has a successful business. I had to fight for Tracee Ellis Ross to wear her hair natural. I fought for the women on that show to have weaves that would be presentable. They didn't want to pay for that to be done at a high level. I also fought to tell the narrative that having weaves is not a pejorative for Black women. Having weaves is a way for us to have fun with our hair, to take the shame away from Black women. And I thought, wow, Mara, wow, Phillis, wow, Anita, wow, Professor, wow, our first Black woman Supreme Court Justice, wow, if you did not sit in that seat and do those things, what would we not have done? And not just us who have a name that you can point to, but for the mothers and the women who, they're not nameless, but we don't know their names, who sit in those seats, who go to work every day, who do all the things. I think about those Phillis Wheatley moments for all of us and how we have progressed and been major contributors to our legacy of Black people and our culture.
Thank you. Wow. No. I'm like, are we wrapping? I think we're at time. And I thank you for taking us there with your honesty and with that testimony. Thank you. I have one last question, open to whomever will have it. When this film is released later this year, what do you hope viewers take away from it? I know, Mara, you've spoken about how this film inspires us to go back to the history, go back to the scholarship, but also moves us towards action and towards dismantling. I guess, what are some other sentiments or takeaways that we would like viewers to have with this final film?
I hope that that particularly Black viewers, they deepen their love for Black people.
I'm gonna cry up here. I just want people to watch this film, and I have to thank, Netflix for being brave enough to allow us to do what we wanted to do. There was even resistance against that within Netflix, the resistance to the women, the Black women contributors, having all Black women contributors, but we fought for that. We fought for everything in this film, and it's such a labor of love and honesty. It's a love letter to our people. It's a love letter to everyone, to the human race. So I just what I want for this film is for it to be seen by as many people as possible globally around the world, and that it changes lives, and that you are not the same after you watch it.
How we've got here is through storytelling. And I think I want us to begin to retell ourselves the story and allow for even the moment that me telling my story, I did take a deep breath. And maybe taking the deep breath will allow for a little bit of release that allows for more space to keep going. We cannot let go of the journey to love ourselves and make and demand that everybody else love us. Or no, they don't have to love us. Just got to respect us.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kendi. Thank you, Roger.
This will be on in the fall. We don't have a day yet, but it will be on in the fall.
Amen.
Thank you all for coming.
And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.